In today's video, we are going to be reviewing and discussing the Snyder Cut.
Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? My name is Chris. This is Jeff. Welcome to Cref.
All right, guys. So happy that you're here. This video has been a long time coming.
Yes,
it
has.
We're both super excited to watch the Snyder Cut. And I think it was last week was when we finally watched it.
Yep, 4 hours.
And boy, was it an experience. So just to let you guys know, this review is going to be split up into two sections. In the first section, we're going to be talking about the original movie and our thoughts and what we thought about that movie.
Yeah, not too long, just a quick discussion.
Exactly. And in the next section, we're going to get into more in depth about the Snyder Cut and what we thought. And there's definitely a lot to talk about. All right, guys. So let's talk a little bit about the older movie, the original Justice League.
Yeah.
Now, there was definitely a lot of hype when this movie came out because we had seen Man of Steel, Batman versus Superman, and in that movie we saw Wonder Woman, right? And so the chance to finally see all these characters sort of come together with the addition of Flash and Aquaman, that was a big deal. So there's definitely a lot of hype. And to me, when we watched the movie in theaters, right? Obviously, we came into the theater super excited, and when the movie was over, I remember thinking, okay, it was okay. Right? I didn't have a terrible taste in my mouth afterwards. I remember reading the reviews after and people were just like bashing this movie. And for me personally, okay, I didn't hate it, but at the same time, it was just like, I wasn't a huge fan of it.
See, one thing that might not be fair is around the same time you had the Avengers coming out, you had all these big Marvel properties doing so well. And so the pressure was on for DC. And especially in our minds, because we're more DC fans than Marvel, right? And I'll be honest with you, right? Once I saw Man of Steel, I didn't have a lot of hope for the DC-verse because after that, I was like, Zack Snyder might not have been the right choice. And I'll tell you why. Man of Steel, to me, Superman, right? Superman done right is a good mixture between Clark Kent, the bumbling reporter, and the strong Superman. And Man of Steel did not get that right. Basically, I just felt like Clark Kent, and maybe it was Henry Cavill's performance, though I personally liked Henry Cavill. I just felt like it was just one character. There was no transition between Clark Kent and Superman. It was just boom, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so after I saw that, and then you had Batman vs. Superman, I was like, my hopes are not high at all. My expectations were low. And so going into Justice League, the first shot is Henry Cavill, Superman, with the lip.
Oh, man.
And I was like, this movie's going to suck. Right? Maybe that was wrong of me, but that's what my impression was. And to be honest, I wasn't wrong.
Right. Now, look, Chris, you made a good point about the sort of thing about the Avengers, right? Because again, parallel to these movies coming out, you had all the Avengers movies coming out. And so granted, there was going to be a lot of comparison. Yeah. And the interesting thing is that, halfway through making, I'm not sure if it was exactly halfway, but at some point during the making of Justice League, right, Zack Snyder had to leave, right, for tragic reasons. Yeah. And he had Joss Whedon come in, right?
Yeah.
And
which we didn't really understand at the time, to be fair.
But here's the thing. There was a little bit of optimism because it's like, we saw what Joss Whedon was able to do with Avengers. And so it's like, okay, well, great. Maybe Joss Whedon can come in and bring a little bit of whatever the stuff
give it
is,
the Avengers treatment,
the magic stuff. Because again, if you look at Batman versus Superman, if you look at Man of Steel, right, you could tell that they were rushing, right, to kind of catch up to Marvel, and they just weren't going to do it, and so they needed somebody to come in and sort of improve upon it. And so I was genuinely optimistic about it, but the biggest issue I had, right, and was the fact that Marvel likes to use this tool, right, this sort of, it's called bathos. And the term means that what you do is you basically take two moments, right? And each of these moments have different tones. So, for example, in a Marvel movie, you'll see a super serious moment immediately cut by a moment of humor, right? You'll notice in Marvel movies, there's a lot of humor, right? And I think for the Marvel movies, that makes sense, right? Like, that's good for Marvel. But for DC, Joss Whedon, if you notice in the original Justice League, there was just a lot of silly humor. It just didn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. because these characters did not have the same rapport that the Avengers had. And so to, try to, insert this sort of artificial feeling humor, it just felt wrong in my opinion. And it sort of cheapened the whole experience to me.
See, I think also, right, what they were trying to do with Justice League is they were trying to do the Avengers treatment, but the problem is that if you watch the movie, maybe you guys didn't feel this way, but again, the original, it feels like they were trying to rush the relationship, the Justice League feel of all these big major characters coming together.
Right.
And one of the specific things I didn't like about the old movie is it's just that it felt rushed. It felt like they were trying to force these relationships that didn't really exist.
Yeah.
And mix that with that, what Jeff just mentioned, the random bits of humor, it just felt so disjointed that there were certain points during the movie where I was like, okay, first of all, Ben Affleck as Batman, I was like, that's a right casting choice, right?
I agree.
And
Great choice.
again, as the leader of the de facto leader of the Justice League without Superman during that time, I was like, okay, perfect, right? Wonder Woman, great, all that, but the humor didn't work. The attempts at bringing them together and their weird kind of individual relationships didn't work,
right.
at least with the time that they were given in the movie, the running time. Yeah. And when you put all that together, you walked out, and again, we grew up watching Justice League Unlimited, Batman Beyond, the original Superman animated series.
Right.
The pressure was on, at least from our perspective. So to watch that, to walk out of there and be like, this is not really, because with DC, in my opinion, either you go like super serious and like super like dark, or just go all the way like Shazam and be like super lighthearted. The in between doesn't really work. Yeah. And I think with Joss Whedon, it didn't work.
Yeah, again, like it's always difficult when you have a new director come in the middle of a project. And I can understand that, right? Because you have these two monumental directors with very unique visions of what they want, right? It's kind of, you kind of look at Star Wars, kind of the same thing happened, right? You had J.J. Abrams with The Force Awakens with his own sort of vision of what Star Wars was going to be. And then with the next movie, with The Last Jedi, you had Rian Johnson, right? And so very, very different visions. And so clearly you can tell that you had the fingerprints of Zack Snyder a little bit there and then Joss Whedon. So it stands to reason that it was going to be a bit of a disjointed experience, right? And that's just kind of what we felt. It's like, yeah, were there some decent moments? Sure, right? But overall, right, it was just, you kind of left the theater or wherever you watched it just feeling like, that's the best that they could have done. Yeah. It didn't really feel like Justice League. It felt like Marvel light, right? It just felt like they were struggling to try to come up with the same magic, and they're just two different animals. DC and Marvel are two different animals. Yes, that they're superheroes at their core. Yeah, but Iron Man and the X-Men are so much different than Superman and Batman. And so when I think about this movie and the impact it had, I mean, it sort of fizzled, right? Everyone just, saw the movie and they were just, really angry or just kind of like, okay, whatever. But then, right, you started having rumors of the Snyder Cut, right? And
I mean, pause right there, right?
Yeah.
At the time, after Justice League came out, I didn't blame Joss Whedon. I blamed Zack Snyder. Because I was like, this is his movie, and Joss Whedon had to come and clean it up. So when I heard about the Snyder Cut, I was like, who cares? Yeah. Because you know what that's the equivalent of to me? That's the equivalent of saying, okay, you know what? Rian Johnson is going to come out and do the Johnson cut of The Last Jedi. You know what I think about that? I don't care. I'd be like, so you're going to take a already screwed up movie and show me how much more you're going to screw it up? Right? I was pissed off. I was like, okay, I don't care an ounce of, the Snyder, what is he going to possibly add to this movie? That was my attitude going into this. But then it was only until after I read the big Vanity Fair article and really realized the full context of what happened behind the scenes, I was like, oh man, I got to maybe give Zack Snyder a chance.
Yeah, again, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Zack Snyder. I mean, I don't think he's an incredible director. I think
300 was great.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's had his
Watchmen
moments.
Also pretty great.
I mean, clearly he's a fan of DC. Like, there's no doubt about that. But yeah, I didn't have a ton of confidence when this mythical Snyder Cut was out there in the ethos. Like, oh, okay, so what, right? But then as this snowball started getting bigger and bigger, oh wait, there's actually a Snyder Cut. Oh, there's actually a lot of footage that wasn't that was unused, right? A lot of these actors are coming out and being like, oh no, there's actually a lot more that you guys didn't see as the audience. Then my curiosity was like piqued. Okay, maybe there's something here. And And I think it was in that same article, Chris, where Chris Nolan, who was, I think, one of the executive producers on the film, was like, he did not like the original cut.
He told Zack Snyder not to watch it.
Not to watch it. And I'm like, okay, well, Chris Nolan, who I, have so much respect for.
Also, who I kind of blame for Man of Steel, by the way. He was a producer on that.
Yeah, he should have directed that, but that's a whole other story. But the fact that he had some sort of confidence in this, again, this mythical Snyder Cut gave me a lot of confidence. I'm just like, okay, well, here's a very well-established director who saw what this could have been.
Yeah.
And so even though the original Justice League didn't quite cut it for me, right? And I think for the majority of people, right? I think the legend of this movie, more than the actual movie itself, was the story, right? All the stuff that went on behind the scenes, the extra scenes. And so I think this has built so much more excitement for the new movie.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, now you'll understand our context going to the new movie, right? It was a love-hate bag, right? Because again, who to blame? Zack Snyder, who didn't like Man of Steel, but Joss Whedon messed it up. But we're hearing rumors. I remember somewhere reading in the articles, like back in the day when it was first announced, hearing like, oh, Green Lantern was supposed to be in it. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, wait a second. So the Vision was actually supposed to be expanded, then Black Suit Superman. That for me right there, I was like, wait, Black Suit Superman? Because that to me told me, okay, Zack Snyder respected the comics, the source material. And so if this is his cut and he wanted to include things like that, and then as time went by, it's like, oh, actually, he's going to include this, and it's going to be like 4 hours. I was like, wait, this is like a legit thing.
Right.
And so after I heard all that, I was like, you know what? I'm ready for this. Like, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. And as you can see, as you're about to see, I think our minds were pretty blown.
All right, guys. So now let's talk about the Snyder Cut. What I can tell you is that from the way the movie opened, I already knew this was going to be a better film. Because
it's a bold claim.
Because what you see is Superman's death, right? And already starts in a somber tone, much more serious, a lot more gravity to that moment. And what you see is Superman literally crying out in pain, right? Which is something that is already a little bit startling because he's Superman. But we've seen this moment before, obviously in Batman versus Superman, but it's prolonged, it's extended, and we see him crying out in pain, and that the echo of that cry going across the world, right? And we see that it's ultimately this cry that awakens or signals the mother boxes that it's okay for Steppenwolf and Darkseid to eventually come and take over Earth, right? Which to me is already such a cool little thing. And they do allude to it later on in the film. But the whole idea that Superman was such an integral part of Earth's defenses, that even these ancient pieces of technology, organic technology that the mother boxes are, recognize how powerful he is. And so even though it's a subtle thing and a sort of interesting way to start the film, I thought that was already a signal to me that this was going to be a much more serious, much more just gravity-filled film.
Yeah, from my perspective, right, that's the best place to start the movie because that's where the last movie ended.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of the times when you have a sequel, you don't always start exactly where the last movie ended, but for this movie, right, because it's setting up so much, because there's so much going to be happening in this movie, you have to start with the most important event that kicks all of it off. And with the old movie, right, like what we said, the way it starts is so disjointed, right? It's Superman in a video being taken by some kid, and obviously you have the mustache. And so, like Jeff said, you definitely do get the sense that, okay, this movie is going to be a lot more serious, but at the same time, it feels like a continuation, so you don't feel like you missed anything.
Right.
Right? Like, there's just no sense of, okay, well, what happened? Did anything happen in between? No, it's just, okay, this is the most important event. This is what starts everything off, and this is what we're going to start the movie with.
And it makes sense because Superman's death is sort of the theme that ties the entire movie together. Right? It's what are the after effects of Superman dying, right? Because what happens naturally is that Batman is like, okay, we need to get a team together because now that Superman's gone, we need to fight. This is what Superman wanted. Superman wanted us to come together, and I couldn't see it. And now that he's gone, I have to kind of take up that mantle. And you get the feeling, right, that Batman feels ill-equipped to do this because nobody really wants to get on his team, right? Nobody wants to be around Batman because Batman's already kind of a odd figure, right? And I like that was consistent throughout the entire movie. This idea that, okay, Superman has such a huge impact on all of our lives, on the world itself. I mean, one thing I liked also, this kind of ties into this, is we have more time with Lois as she's grieving, right? You didn't really get to see that in the original movie. You see Lois and you see the fact that, she's just kind of retreated into her own little shell because she doesn't know how to deal with the loss of Superman. And the entire world is kind of with her on this. And Batman, in his own way, has to kind of pick up the pieces and say, okay, even though I feel his death too, I have to be the one that kind of keeps on going.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, just going back for a second, the movie starting with Superman dying, right, is probably one of the first things I want to point out about this movie, which is context.
Oh, man.
Okay? Context is king in this movie.
Context is
because automatically, right, you understand that this entire movie, just like Jeff said, is in the context of Superman, basically a god, but also a symbol,
right,
dying, right, and the aftermath. But in context of all that stuff, you have all these different characters living and fleshed out, the context being fleshed out, where all the little scenes that are being added, the in-between stuff that was added in the Snyder Cut really gives you the context of, okay, this is what this character is going through in light of what happened, and this is how they're dealing with it. And you as the audience feel like you're kind of going through it with them because they take the time. You have the time to do it. And let me just say this, right? Even though this is kind of a director's cut and it's 4 hours, I felt like it was a little bit of cheating because no movie is 4 hours in theaters, right? Yeah. So my question, just kind of in the back of my mind was, okay, if Zack Snyder had stayed on, right, and this movie had to be limited to 2 hours, let's say 30 minutes, like the normal theatrical cut, right? Would we have felt the same way? Like, what would he have been able to accomplish? Because he doesn't have 4 hours. He still has 2 hours and 30 minutes. So, I don't know. I was still like, okay, I get it, but it still feels like a little bit of cheating. But, I don't mind it because I really enjoyed it.
Right. So, let's talk about context for a second, right? Because in the original movie, right, because things felt so rushed, there was very little context why things were happening. Yep. It was obviously mentioned that and understood that Superman was dead, all these different things, but context is also important for each of the individual characters, right? And I would say this movie in particular gave the most context to Cyborg as a character.
Gosh, yeah.
I mean,
much needed context.
Because in the original film, he was just kind of put off to the side as sort of supporting character, and he was given a little bit of context, but he just, for the most part, felt like he was just this brooding, angry sort of side character, right? That, at the end, was the one that dealt with the mother boxes. But
I mean, when I was watching the original movie, right, I was like, I don't really care about his parts. I was like, get to Batman, get to Superman, but Cyborg, I was like, he was just too broody, a little complainy for me. I was like, I don't really care about him.
But in this movie, you get to see his entire history. You see bits and pieces of the football game. You see the car accident. You see his relationship with his father, his relationship with his mother.
Yep.
And so all of that combined really makes you care about him more. And it's almost interesting to think of the fact that this is almost just as much his story as it is Batman's or Superman's.
It's true.
Because he's almost the center of things. And, one of my favorite scenes is where you see him sort of learning how to use his powers.
That was one of my favorite sequences.
And, you see him being able to, there's this scene in particular where there's like this woman who I think she's a waitress and, she's struggling with her finances. And so Cyborg realizes that he has the power to literally, just increase her bank account. And there's this really cool, like, holographic interface scene that eventually bleeds into him standing right next to the ATM where she is. And it's such a small moment, but it reminds you that he's a hero too.
Yep.
Right? Like, there's a reason Batman picks these different people. It's not just because they have powers. It's because they show heroicism, right? It's because they show heroics. And so with Cyborg in particular, right, like you see there's just so much more context around him.
Yeah.
And that's consistent throughout the entire movie. It's not just like a chunk. It's you see it at various stages and at very important points of the movie.
I mean, that whole sequence with his dad on the tape recorder narrating basically his abilities, right? You know, when you see Cyborg, even in the original cut, you don't really think he's all that powerful. Right, you're like, okay, so he can hack into things. He's got, you know, like a blaster or whatever. That's basically it. But what you don't realize, and what you do realize in the Snyder Cut through that whole sequence is he's almost as powerful in Superman in certain contexts because he has control to basically any system, basically in the entire universe. Right? He can hack into anything. Right. He can be as rich as he wants. I mean, I think his dad basically referred to him as a god on the earth. And I was like, you know what? All this time, we think of Superman as a god. We even think of Wonder Woman, Batman as gods, Aquaman as gods, but not Cyborg.
Right.
But again, it's easy to forget that in a lot of the comics, Cyborg is a founding member of the Justice League, and it's for a reason because he's that powerful. And I think one of the things this movie did well, just like Jeff said, is this is his story too. And I think it was done so well because they put the right scenes to develop his character. Because again, in the last movie, in the old version, I was like, what is his character? What is his personality?
Why
just
is he
brooding.
even there?
Yeah, I mean, there's no humor, there's nothing. But you see the choices he makes in those in-between scenes. You see that almost when he's giving the information about the mother boxes, how the Nazis had it, that almost sense of,
that was
okay,
a great sequence.
Yeah, it just felt like, oh, he's kind of in charge here. He's giving like the intelligence aspect of it. You know, it felt very, very, again, contextualized.
Yeah, I think the best way in my mind to kind of think about it is in the old movie, he was a plot device. In this movie, he was an actual character. Right. And I think that the concept of context, you know, goes, it's not just about Cyborg, right? It's about each of the characters got way more time, right? Because take, for example, Wonder Woman, right? You see that when she's first learning about Steppenwolf, right? She actually goes and does a little bit of exploring. She goes into that underground like cavern thing. And she has this, you know, even like in the old movie, she was just Wonder Woman. She wasn't really dealing with anything aside from the loss of Steve Trevor, right? But in this movie, she was, you know, made to feel guilty by Steppenwolf because she wasn't there for the Amazonians while he was attacking and stuff. And that's something that he constantly brought up again and again. And so each character, Barry with his father and, you know, feeling isolated and not having friends and, you know, being alone, all these things, right? Each of the characters got their time to shine, right? And again, I think a lot of people will say, okay, well, yeah, it was 4 hours, right? So of course, but even still, right? Like he took the time to give each character their time to shine so that eventually when they did come together, it meant something. It wasn't just, oh, cool, people with powers coming together. You know, they weren't just resting on the laurels of, oh, this is Aquaman and this is the Flash. And it's like, no. Here are characters that we're learning to care about that come together for a common purpose. Yes. And I think that was good.
Speaking of characters, the second point I want to make about the movie, what I really liked about it is what they did with Steppenwolf. Okay, because in the last movie, right, I always felt like, first of all, no one knows who Steppenwolf is.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, even me as a DC fan, I was like, oh, yeah, Steppenwolf. I forgot about him.
But why him?
Well, why him? Right? And in this movie, I feel like Zack Snyder was like, yeah, exactly. Why him? And the thing is, what they did so well is, number one, Steppenwolf was still menacing. He was still a pretty good villain, but the reason why he was good was not because he was the main villain. It's because there was somebody bigger and badder, right? And that put him in better context.
Right.
They got to come back to that word, right? I think the changing of his voice sounded way better because these are people, these are the new gods, right? These are people from Apocalypse. They should sound menacing. They shouldn't just sound like some British actor. I think the added kind of voice modulation made it sound so much better. But also, again, the fact that every once in a while, Steppenwolf would have to report to Desaad. Right? I was like, what? So Desaad? Cool. I was so awesome. Cool. I mean, not to mention the voice acting for Desaad, whoever that was.
Fantastic.
But the fact that, okay, not only is this crazy, super powerful guy there, he has a report to Desaad, who's not even the most powerful guy, but there's Darkseid sitting in the back waiting to come.
Right.
That whole transition of Steppenwolf not to the main villain to me, made the movie so much better.
Right, because again, like you said, Chris, Steppenwolf is already a intimidating character, right? And again, what they did with his armor,
And they added the gore too, like the bloodiness with the axes.
Again, they built him up a lot, right? You see him basically decimating, the Amazonians, the people from Atlantis, right? Like all these people, right? And so it's built up that okay, he is an intimidating character, but the key to all that is that he's not the end boss, right? He is just a herald of this greater evil that is to come, who is Darkseid, right? And that just makes Darkseid even more menacing because it's just like, okay, this guy's strong, right? But he's afraid of this guy who's Darkseid. And I think, when I saw Darkseid in the movie, I was like, yes, this is what I want, because in order to match the power that is Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, you need somebody with just that amount of presence that Darkseid had, right?
Right.
And when you see, there's a moment in the movie where Desaad, wants to talk. I mean, Desaad and Steppenwolf are talking, right? And Steppenwolf mentions the anti-life equation. And Desaad is like, okay, Darkseid wants to talk to you himself. And then Darkseid comes and you see Steppenwolf get on his knees. And it's this moment of like, oh my goodness, like here's the man finally. And because they had time to do this, it made for a better bad guy. I mean, again, to me, and I don't know, maybe you agree with this or disagree with this, Chris, is in the Marvel movies, aside from Thanos, there aren't very good villains. There aren't that many good villains. But in this movie, you have Darkseid, who they took essentially entire movie to build up to be this force, this like God in his own right. And I think that
which you need
for
DC heroes, as powerful as they are, as epic, right, as they are, right? These are statuesque characters,
right?
You need villains that are as statuesque and as epic, right? Because again, in Marvel, you can have a villain like the Vulture or Electro. I mean, you can have Apocalypse and stuff as well, but again, most of the villains are not like that. And the way Marvel does their movies, it's more like, oh, in New York City, there's that guy who got it. It's not as epic. But in DC, you need those huge epic characters. And the thing is, the fact that Darkseid was there, the fact that he wanted the anti-life equation, there felt like there was a reason. The mother boxes, to me, was not a really good device.
Right.
It's like, okay, we need to get 3 boxes, and if they get together, oh no. Right. That wasn't menacing enough to me. What was more menacing is, okay, if they come together, then Darkseid comes, and then the anti-life equation is there, and there's this whole thing, and then you show like the nightmare sequence, right? That to me was a better setup. And so again, with context is king here, where you had, again, Steppenwolf is not the main villain, which gives Darkseid the spotlight, and then it puts a spotlight in, okay, how does the Justice League without Superman fight this guy? Which makes it a lot more epic.
Right. And so putting Darkseid on this side for a second. You see what I did there? The fact that this movie was going to be 4 hours, right? A lot of people had contention with this. I was not one of them, because if it was up to me, every movie would be 3.5, 4 hours. Because
take your time.
Especially movies like this, because I want time to spend time with these characters. I want story. I don't want you to have to cut corners. And I will say with 100% confidence that Zack Snyder did not cut any corners. Like he put every and all scenes stuffed into this movie. And to me, I think it was a good thing, because you get to see quieter moments. It's not always about the pizzazz and the bang. It's about the quieter moments. For example, the moments that Bruce had with Alfred, right? I love Jeremy Irons as Alfred. I think he's a better Alfred than Michael Caine. You can find me on that, but
100%.
And the fact that we just got more of him, right? We get more scenes like after Clark is resurrected. We have a few more scenes with him. We get to see Martian Manhunter, right? These are just, again, a lot of these are just little moments, right? But they made a big difference, because it makes the world that Zack Snyder was trying to build, the idealized world that he had in his mind the whole time, feel richer, feel fuller, right? It's not just this super rushed feeling, right? And it doesn't matter to me that it's 4 hours, because it's like, we get to see Flash with his dad. We get to see Cyborg with his father. We get to see Alfred. We get to see Alfred talk with Diana, the little tea scene that they had, right? these are all wonderful little, because it's not, again, when you're world building, right? Some of the greatest worlds in books and in movies, it's not the big stuff. It's the little things, the little details that really make a world come to life.
Yeah.
And to me, what made me want to sit there for 4 hours was, okay, what little moment are they going to come up with next, right? It's, when they were digging up, Clark's body, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Barry with what's her name? Iris, right? Saving Iris.
Right? Again, these are, little moments, right? But the 4 hours gave him the time. And I think for all DC fans, we appreciate it because it's just more time with these characters, especially knowing that we might not get a sequel to this movie.
It does kind of suck because, I mean, if you can't tell already, we really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
The 4 hours didn't feel long enough to me. I was like, go 5 hours, go 6 hours, go into the entire nightmare sequence. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because, again, I just felt that by the end of the movie, which I didn't feel in the original, I was attached to the characters. Yeah. I actually cared about Cyborg. I cared about the Flash. I was like, okay, I want to see more of their interactions.
I'm ready for more.
And ironically enough, that was without all the random little humor sequences. Like, for example, in the old movie, you had Aquaman when he had the lasso on him, and he was like admitting how hot, Wonder Woman was. Yeah. I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't even actually, it was only after the fact I noticed they took that out.
They took a lot of that stuff out.
And I was like, you know what? I didn't feel the lack of it.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, either you take it seriously or you don't, right? You can insert humor. There was definitely humor, but don't go Marvel humor. Don't just completely throw it out of context, right? And I think they did such a good job with that. And, just like Jeff said, all the small moments really added up. Yeah. Again, if I were Zack Snyder, one thing I would have done is he probably couldn't do this, but I would have recast Lex Luthor as anybody but Jesse Eisenberg. Yeah. Right? I mean, that was the one mistake. Yeah. I was like, dude, like Bryan Cranston or anybody else.
Michael Rosenbaum.
I mean, come on. That would be amazing.
Maybe.
But overall, I would say, 4 hours was more than enough.
Yeah.
Should have been longer, in my opinion, 5 hours, 6 hours. If Zack Snyder wanted to make a part 2, another 4 hours, I would have accepted it.
Yeah.
I love The Martian Manhunter. I think that was a good choice.
Man, that was a great, the actor that played him was a perfect
choice. Which I didn't realize he was from Man of Steel. He's the general.
Oh yeah. Okay. I didn't know that.
See?
That's
right?
so true.
And, even the nightmare sequence, right? Like, I'm not a big fan of the Jared Leto Joker, but I thought that was pretty well done. I was like, okay, different, interesting. What else? Was there anything else that really stood out to you before we give our final scores?
Well, again, right, going back to the little moments, because again, this movie, we'd already seen this movie a few years ago, right? It's not like, this was an entirely new movie.
But it was, kind of.
Yes, but what I mean by that is that it was the little moments that made it a new movie, right? It wasn't the big stuff, right? Because they still fight Steppenwolf, right? They still, all get together, go on the big plane thing. Like, they do all that stuff, right? But it's the little moments, like when Aquaman, like when he's going back into the water, that Icelandic lady just starts singing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, cool. Those things just...
Even the music, actually. The music was better.
They changed it, yeah.
Which I was like, interesting.
After Superman resurrects, right? When he's walking through the ship and you hear the voices of both his fathers, right?
Oh, yeah.
What a great moment that was when he chooses... He walks past all his suits, right? And his traditional suit is there. And he chooses the black suit. You see the takeoff sequence, right? Because it's just... It didn't feel rushed. There's just it's like Zack Snyder was taking a breath. Yeah. It was just allowing this universe to breathe, right? Because we just want to spend time in this universe, right? And so I think for the most part, what made this movie to me so great, and I make no mistake, I absolutely love this movie. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, after we finished, Chris and I were both like, wow, that was good. Wow.
I was debating whether to watch it again.
Yeah.
4 hours.
I would sit through it. Yeah. I mean, it was just, I genuinely loved it. But it was because Zack Snyder didn't shy away from those small moments, right? And one other thing I'll say is that this movie also helped me appreciate how much I loved Ben Affleck as Batman and as Bruce.
True.
Right?
True.
And it's like, I knew it 100%. Before, but to see him again, right, as the leader of the Justice League in a sense, right? Just the de facto leader until Superman came back. This made me realize how much of a good job he did.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's kind of underrated to me.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, again, when we think of Batman, right? It's always the dark, brooding Batman, whatever. But this Batman was different because he was holding the torch for Superman, right? Remember, there was that one line about faith, right?
Yeah.
Where Alfred was kind of having a little bit of a crisis of conscience, and Batman's like, "Yeah, you just gotta have faith. I have faith." And I was like, "Oh, that's unique to hear from Batman."
Yeah.
But it felt right.
Yeah.
It felt right because the way Ben Affleck portrays Bruce, mostly it was Bruce. Mostly the movie is not Batman, it's Bruce.
It's Bruce, yeah.
Which you haven't really seen before in most Batman movies. Mostly it's just Batman action scenes.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed seeing Bruce, just like I would have enjoyed seeing more Clark Kent.
Yeah.
Because most people forget that that's a huge part of the character.
I felt he was a little more optimistic in this version as opposed to the older version. He was kind of like bitter and, guilt-ridden.
Yeah.
And this one, obviously, he felt guilty about Superman, but at the same time, like, you could tell that being around Superman and that hope and optimism,
rubbed off
on him. And I'm like, that feels much more organic and it feels much more natural of a progression than just him feeling guilty.
Exactly.
And I think that kind of goes for the film in general. It just felt more natural.
Yep.
It felt more organic.
It made me have faith.
It made me have faith.
Lots of faith.
Because I think for the past few years, I mean, there's few exceptions, obviously. DC has not been given the love that I think it deserves, right? There's so much good animated stuff out there, but to see the characters that we love after having grown up with Batman Beyond and Batman the animated series and Superman animated series and Justice League Unlimited, right? To see them portrayed, not perfectly, but I think as good as it could have been within the frame of context and given a second chance, because that's what this movie felt like, a second chance. And it's interesting because this movie really is about second chances, right? Everybody in this movie, in a sense, gets a second chance. Batman gets a second chance. Superman gets a second chance, right? Not everybody gets that. And it's interesting how that parallels because Zack Snyder, in spite of the tragedy that he went through in his personal life, was given a second chance with his baby, with this movie that meant so much to him.
Yeah.
And you can see that portrayed clearly in this movie. There was a lot of love and a lot of passion, weaved into this movie. And I felt it, Me too. Right. And at the same time, you see that these characters, right, when Superman gets resurrected, you see in him embracing that second chance. And, you see just the hope that everybody feels when he's there. Right. And so I think that the movie on its own was fantastic. Right. But the story around it too,
the context,
right? There's that word again. Makes it so much better because it shows that, second chances are possible. Second chances for a movie that most people wrote off, right?
Including us,
was made better, with time and with love and with effort. I think that says something for the movie industry in general because that says like, hey, you know what? Maybe don't just give up on a franchise. Maybe don't just give up on a movie. Maybe if it's given the love and attention that it deserves, if there's belief and that there's hope, right? Look what can happen. And so, Chris, with all that said, and if you have any other points, feel free to add them in. What score would you give this?
Wow. Again, like if you guys can't already tell, we both love the movie. I love the movie. Again, as you guys heard my comments earlier about walking out of the original movie just disappointed, dejected, just being like, this is not what me as a kid watching Justice League Unlimited dreamed of in a live action version. But when we finally turned off the 4-hour Snyder Cut, I felt it again. I felt, you know what? It's not perfect. No. It's not exactly what I want it to be. Maybe not the exact actors I would have picked, but I felt when they were all standing in that slow motion shot, waiting for the ship to come up, just looking out onto the ruined land there, they're all kind of smiling, looking at each other. I just felt, you know what? This is Justice League.
Yeah.
If this is what it could be, and this is what it's going to be, then I would love to see more. Right. And I'm hoping, like Jeff was saying about second chances, that there might be a hope for a second chance, maybe with the new Flash movie or whatever might come in the future. But If I had to give it a score, like I said, it wasn't perfect, but if I had to give it out of 5, I would say a 4.95.
Okay. All right.
And how about you?
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that I love this movie. I loved the context that they gave each of the characters. I love the context that they gave Steppenwolf and Darkseid. I love the fact that Darkseid was included, that he was portrayed as this powerhouse, this menace, right? I loved the fact that there was just these little moments that added up to a more organic, natural feeling film. A film that just was more like a love letter to what the Justice League was supposed to be. And 4 hours to me was not enough time. I wish it was longer because I just like spending time with these characters. And I think Zack Snyder fighting for this movie and the fans fighting for this movie added to the experience, because this was more than just a studio saying, hey, okay, let's give it a second chance. No, this was fans who really believed not only in Zack Snyder, but the vision and the characters saying, okay, this is worth it, right? If we can resurrect this, just like Superman was resurrected, it'll make a difference. And in my opinion, it did. It really did make a difference, because Zack Snyder was given the resources and the time to create the movie that him and his wife and Chris Nolan believed in. And I can see it. And again, like you said, Chris, is it perfect? No, of course not. But was it much, much better than the original film, which was almost a Frankenstein monster of what the original, what it was supposed to be? Yes, it was much, much better. So to give it a score, just because of everything, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5.
Wow. Okay.
All right, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching. We really do appreciate it. And let us know down in the comments below what you thought about the movie, what you thought about our review. I mean, do you agree with our scores? Do you disagree?
Let us know your favorite part of the movie, by the way.
Of course. There's, again, 4 hours worth of movie. So I'm sure there's a part in there that you guys like. But anyway, until the next time, we will see you later.
Bye, guys.